All right, so that's what they've done so far. And it hasn't been like it was the last couple of years. The last couple of years, they let everybody walk. They signed, Mooney 2 years ago. Last year, Hargrave. They went with the big name guy. This year, they went with more of a depth play. But now they're heading into the draft. What do you view? Here we are. It's St. Patrick's Day. Um, middle of March. We're basically 6 weeks away from the draft. What's the number one need right now? What's the number one need? Because you kind of said it, Brian. They kind of filled all their needs. It's almost as if they said to themselves, "Hey, let's get into a position where we're taking best player available more times than not in the draft because we're kind of covered everywhere." That's the vibe I get. But other people are saying no. It's got to be, O line, or it's got to be a corner, it's got to be D line. Where do you what's the priority going into the draft when you look at their roster?
I mean, they could go a ton of ways because they could play a game tomorrow if they had to. So I love that. And I hope they do go best player available. And I think that's generally what you should do in that situation. And I think they've forced some need a few times recently in drafts, and especially those early picks in rounds 1, 2, 3. And it hasn't worked out as well as some of the picks in later rounds. So whatever they're doing in rounds 4, 5, especially 6, 7, uh, do that, but just do that in round 1 with a more physically talented player, and maybe you're finding yourself perennial Pro Bowlers there at pick 31. I still think offensive line meets up with all the talent in the draft and what the 49ers need. I do think that the
Who's your
Colton.
favorite? Do you have a favorite of the tackles?
I have
I mean,
favorite.
obviously Alt or something, but I mean,
Yeah,
of the guys that you think might be there.
I love Fuaga, and I do think I've seen him as high as pick 10 to the Jets. The Jets
Yeah.
have done some things in free agency in the offensive line, so maybe they don't go offensive tackle at 10 after all. I don't think he's going to go that high. As fun as his tape was to watch, he's been the most fun player I've watched. I think Graham Barton and Fuaga have been the most fun, and I actually just finished an episode with Croc where we were breaking down Graham Barton and Amarius Mims, and I would be on board with any of those names I've mentioned at pick 31. I think Graham Barton's more of the third round guy physically, but that plays like an animal and plays up and is a better player. Is he a round 1 guy? I don't know if he is. I'd put him more in the second round. But Mims is a freak of nature. He doesn't move backwards. He's so well proportioned for a guy who's 340 pounds. It's unreal. And he's raw as heck. He's only played 8 games. But if you drafted someone like Amarius Mims, and they might have to move up into the 20s, and they absolutely could do that. In fact, they moved up from 31 to 25 to draft Brandon Ayuk in 2020. So, that's a move they can make, is to go up and get the right guy if he's there, whether it's Fuaga or someone like Mims. I could absolutely see those guys getting into the 20s and seeing the 49ers going and making a move there. And for Fuaga, you plug him in at right tackle and he starts day 1, and you say, okay, Colton, you're the swing tackle or you're competing somewhere else. But if you draft someone like Mims, who's super raw, maybe he doesn't even start right away. Maybe he even redshirts an entire year, like they've done in the past with some rookie players, and they've done it on their offensive line, right? And even with Spencer Burford kind of playing part-time roles. And Mims is a really interesting player because how physically gifted he is, but he's going to fall later than he should for his physical attributes, just because you don't know what to do with him, and he's raw, and he might not be able to play for any of those teams right away. I like, I love the BYU kid. I always wreck his name, so I don't even want to say it, but he's really fun to watch. If I looked at a player who I would bet money on right now, who could be an early starter in his career, still has some upside, is going to be there at pick 31 for the 49ers, I'd probably go with Sua Mataya out of BYU, and I think he is an offensive tackle in the NFL. And then you have these other guys that are really fun to watch, like Fautanu from Washington. He's probably the best interior lineman in the draft. He's got long enough arms. Is a team gonna just will no team allow him to play tackle because he's 6'3" and 3/8"? He's got the arm length, and he's a really good tackle in college. He'll probably move inside in the NFL. He'll probably go before the Niners pick. Jordan Morgan is another guy who's probably going to move inside in the NFL. I'd probably rather try to swing for someone who I thought was going to stick at tackle. And then you got guys like Patrick Paul, who's a mountain of a man, who I'd probably prefer more in the second round as well, but maybe you move down. Maybe maybe use one of those extra fourth rounders, Larry, to move up from the second round to draft one of these offensive linemen if you do go corner, or dark horse position in round 1, wide receiver, Larry.
Yeah, I want to get into that as well. It's funny, this offensive line group, it's like Alt, Fashanu, Fuaga, who's awesome. I mean, you got to watch the Fuaga tape. Not you, Brian, but people watching this. I mean, this kid is just like he's like a Coke machine with a bad attitude or something. He's just a ridiculous wide body. Then there's J.C. Latham. In a lot of ways, J.C. Latham is the physical prototype. I mean, he is just a ridiculous 6'6", like 350, but he looks kind of lean. Mims is even maybe more the physical prototype. He's 6'8", 340 with like a lean waist.
And 36-inch arm length as well for me.
Yeah, but what worries me about him is just the 8 games. The guy's only played 8 games. That always is a concern.
Combine.
You got hurt at the combine. I'm always worried about guys who don't play. I like Jordan Morgan's profile quite a bit, but then you see the short arms. I talked to Trent Williams about offensive tackles in the draft late in the year, just messing around in the locker room. He loves the kid from Oklahoma, Tyler Guyton. He's like, he's a road grader in the run game. And I'm like, are you biased because he's your, he's your homeboy from Oklahoma? He's like, no, man, I like him. I like him a lot. So, I mean, Guyton is considered destructive in the run game. He might be there. The Sumatea kid, I thought he walking around the combine, I thought he looked like about 280, 285. Find out he was 324. So, I mean, that's a great sign. When a guy walks around and you think he's 280 and he's really 325, I mean, that's a great sign. Patrick Paul's kind of high cut, but he's got ridiculously long arms. The Yale kid's got like historically crazy long arms. I mean, he's like 38-inch long arms, but he didn't play this year with the quad. The guys that I kind of like are down the road, Javon Foster from Missouri. I watched him in the one-on-ones, just absolutely stonewall guys. I mean, as soon as he gets his hands on you, you're just cooked. And he's 6'5", 320, but I mean, he's got a frame. He might be able to put on 10 pounds, 15 pounds. Christian Jones from Texas, I really like. I really like Ladarius Henderson from Michigan. I like the Maryland kid. But the guy that I thought was, the 2 guys that I really have just think, man, I want those guys on the team, are both of the South Dakota State guys, Garrett Greenfield and McCormick, I think his name is.
Mason McCormick, yeah.
Mason McCormick. McCormick worked out incredibly well. These guys, I've watched some videos of them kind of hanging out together. I mean, if I'm the Niners, I'd try to get both those guys. I mean, Greenfield is wide and athletic and probably going to be in there in the 3rd round. McCormick is destructive and wide, and they play really well together. I mean, to me, that's a combo I wouldn't mind getting together. And I know it's South Dakota State, so you never know. But McCormick went to the combine and worked out like as well as almost anybody at the guard position in any conference. So I really like that combo from South Dakota State, and I kind of like the gigantic blonde guy from Wyoming, Frank Crum, who's 6'8", 313. He worked out great.
Yeah,
he looked really, really good. Walter Rouse is not a bad prospect who started at Stanford and now is at Oklahoma. So I mean, it's a really good tackle draft. I want to go tackle in the 1st round. But then, you know what? Let's talk about your idea of wide receiver, because that to me might be the better, place to go in the 1st round. I know everybody wants to go with the tackle, and they need a tackle. There's no question they need a tackle, but the wide receivers that could be there, I mean, like if Brian Thomas is there, I'm running that card in. I just think he's tremendous. And I'm not as big a fan of Ladd McConkey, Troy Franklin, Keon Coleman, Adonai Mitchell. I kind of like a little bit. Worthy obviously ran that crazy 40. But then further down the list, guys like Xavier Legette at 230 pounds and running in the 4.3s. Malachi Corley from Western Kentucky, very deep, very Debo-like
guy, right? I think if I had to guess, who Kyle Shanahan likes. And I was on Deebo Samuel. That one was pretty easy just because they were coaching the coach in the Senior Bowl that year. But I knew they would like Brandon Ayuk. The guys I think they like that Kyle Shanahan's going to like the most is Malachi Corley, just because he's so similar to Deebo Samuel. And there's been a lot of next Deebos in drafts recently. He's the closest when he's 5'10", 215 pounds. He will truck guys. I was actually a former running back. You want to do wide back stuff. And if maybe the 49ers are thinking about moving off of Deebo Samuel at some point in the next 12 months, Malachi Corley would be a nice little replacement there. Could come in and have a low stress job the first year, and then probably more of a second round pick than someone you have to take at 31 too. So that's definitely a name to circle for 49ers fans. But I think he's going to love Ladd McConkey. He's going to love Ladd McConkey. He's going to love Ricky Pearsall, I think, just the way these guys can separate, the way they run their routes, especially McConkey. And one of the comps I've seen for Ladd McConkey is Emmanuel Sanders, who Kyle Shanahan traded for with the 49ers, and which is an interesting one because he's a little taller, but profiles similarly as an athlete. And, Sanders was a ridiculous athlete coming out of college. And just, could separate just that quick twitch. And McConkey has that. So I don't know if they'll go wide receiver at 31, but there might be a really good player there. And whether they trade Ayuk now or Deebo Samuel after next year, you need someone that could come in and start next season at wide receiver, and it takes a year. So you might have to start that clock now, get developing a guy now, so you don't go into next year's draft thinking we got to start a guy that can start day one, because that's difficult to do in Kyle Shanahan's offense. So I think wide receiver is a sneaky need in this draft, even if they haven't traded anybody before the draft. I think second round has been just the prime spot for wide receivers, though, in recent years. And so there's going to be a good player there near pick 63 at wide receiver. I wouldn't be shocked at all if the 49ers went wide receiver at that spot.